Ahead of the Lunar New Year holidays. Joining us now is Jayant Acharya, CEO and Joint Managing Director of JSW Steel. Jayant, really good to have you with us, especially on a day like today when we continue to hear about tariff news. I know that we don't have the details when it comes to steel tariffs from this administration, but given your experience in the first Trump administration, how are you bracing for impact?
So thank you very much. The geopolitical landscape has been very challenging in the past few years. And I think the new policies which the Trump administration would announce needs to be watched. Any changes in policies which would impact tariffs is likely to escalate trade tensions, and that could impact supply chain. That could be a drag on the global growth. We do expect some tariffs which would be levied. However, as far as steel is concerned, I think as far as India is concerned, there are already tariffs in place. Most of the countries already have safeguards into the United States. So there is hardly any exports from, let's say, India to US. It may impact certain other countries, but I think China's direct exports of steel is also limited. We'll have to wait and watch how the tariffs play is announced by the Trump administration.
Give us an understanding of JSW's business with the United States, because we know that you have a subsidiary, that you have a plant. Are you planning more investments in this environment? How much do you export as well?
Yeah, so we have two facilities in the United States, one in Ohio and one in Texas. We have been investing into those assets over a period of time. We are investing to upgrade certain facilities to be able to provide steel for oil and gas and steel for the wind. We will have to see how the policy on the fuel and the energy plays out. I'm sure oil and gas will continue to be strong as the Trump administration has guided. On the wind side, we will have to wait and watch. My feeling is whatever projects have been taken up under the IRA or otherwise will continue to be there. If there is a change in policies going forward on wind, especially onshore and offshore, that is where we may have to calibrate a little bit of the investments which we are doing in our facilities in Texas. As far as exports from India to the United States is concerned, it's hardly there. It's close to zero. Our exports from India to the world is very limited. 92% of our business last quarter has been domestic. So luckily the country, India, is growing very well. So we are happy to be focused more on the Indian business.
Are there concerns for you that if we do see these tariffs, especially more onto Chinese steel, that you could see more flooding into the India market, and that would, of course, hurt your business?
That is very true. I think last year, China did see very high exports, close to 120 million tons, a weaker domestic market, and I would say relatively higher production continue to encourage exports, which has dampened the steel prices globally. We are seeing stimulus measures which China is trying to take. I would say these are early steps, and we need to see how it plays out. There is a moderation in production last year. There is an expectation that production may moderate in this year also by about 2%. So with an improved domestic environment, in case the stimuluses are effective, and a lower production, hopefully will reduce the exports. But the exports coming into India is a challenge, and we have seen a very high level of imports into India. Unfortunately, we are the fastest growing major economy in the world. We are vulnerable since we do not have any trade barriers in place. We are looking at a level playing field, and I think adequate steps would be taken by the government to see that level playing field is provided.
That 25% safeguard duty that's being proposed by the steel ministry, for example, is already being reviewed by the European Union right now. What do you expect the impact to be on your business, and what would you say to people that think that this would be impractical to implement?
In Europe, did you ask about the European side?
Yeah, the safeguard duty of 25% that India's steel ministry is thinking of.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say that if you look at the safeguard and tariffs which the other countries have put, United States has got a 25% safeguard for many, many years. Europe has a safeguard of 25% with the tariff rate quota. Canada has a safeguard of 25%. And many other countries have got various anti-dumping and trade measures in place. As a result, what's happening is that most of the steel from China is getting diverted into other countries, especially Asia, and India becomes more vulnerable. Whether the duty or whether there is a positive view on the trade investigation remains to be seen. But I think what needs to be looked at is fair trade. We would not like cheap steel or unfair trade to come into India. And that is what we are looking to arrest. Otherwise, as a country, I think we have a very positive trajectory in the medium to long term. And the steel demand in India is growing very well.
Tell us a little bit about India's demand, especially in terms of what you're expecting to see in capacity by 2030.
Yeah, so India today has a capacity of about close to 190 million tons. We are the second largest producer and consumer of steel in the world. Last year, the demand of steel in India grew by 11% or so in the financial year in 9 months. We expect the demand to be touching 150 million tons as we close the financial year in March, which is an incremental growth of 14 million tons. So India is actually contributing today to the major demand, incremental demand of the rest of the world. So many other countries are actually slowing down, and India is adding to the incremental demand of the world. Going forward, a very strong infrastructure pipeline, a very strong focus on manufacturing, growth in the hinterland, the rural side activities picking up based on physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, communication network, and that all aids a very rapid growth in steel demand as well. So we are very positive. We are looking at 300 million tons or so in India, and the demand should go up from here by close to 80 to 100 million tons by the end of the decade.
And yet your business itself, we continue to see the pressure on profit growth, especially given weaker prices as well. How do you plan to overcome this, and could it actually delay some of your projects as well?
Yeah, so from a cost standpoint, we are taking various measures to reduce the cost at our end. We are also expecting the raw material cost to moderate. That would play into the profitability metrics. Our volumes are growing because our 5 million ton facilities have just been commissioned, and those will ramp up in the coming quarter and the year ahead. So our absolute volumes will increase, and we look forward to a better quarter and a year ahead.
And what can you tell us when it comes to that venture that you have going on with POSCO? I mean, more Korean steel makers and companies want to enter the Indian market. Do you have an idea of when production could start with the joint venture as well, and what the plans are from here?
Yeah, so India, as I mentioned, is a growing country, and there is an interest from many foreign players to set up facilities in India. We have discussed with POSCO the possibility of setting up a facility together. We are looking for land and facilities in the states in India, especially where iron ore is located. And I think it will take us a month or two to identify the land, and then we should be able to start the joint venture activities. So it will take after that about 3 to 4 years to get the facilities on ground.
And before we let you go, Jayant, just to clarify your investments in the United States, when you talk about sort of changing or adjusting, are we talking about more investments and more hiring that could potentially help with getting on a good foot with the Trump administration? Or are we thinking about resizing and just perhaps making it smaller, given right now the challenges and risks that economy could face with the levies?
So currently our expansions and investments in Ohio, about $145 million is already on. In Baytown, close to the second phase of expansion, about $110 million is on. So these two investments put together, about $250 million is in progress. The Ohio investment will carry on. The Baytown, Texas investment is something which we may have to calibrate the product mix going ahead in case the wind projects are directionally changed. So I think our focus will continue to see how to align these investments better to be aligned more to the growth which United States is likely to see in the coming years.
Jayant Acharya, really good to have you with us. He's Joint MD and CEO at JSW Steel, of course, on a day with plenty of news coming on potential tariffs and just